Hello bookworms! Today I'm going to be talking about the worst books that I read in 2023 and all of the DNFs that I had. Obviously, disclaimer for the beginning, some of these might be books that you really love and that is so great for you, but they just didn't work for me. Reading is obviously very subjective. Everyone has different tastes and these are the ones that just didn't work for me for whatever reason. I read just over 200 books this year and this is actually probably the longest list that I've had of worst books and DNFs. I feel like I've gotten a lot better about DNFing books that I'm not enjoying. And I also I don't know, I haven't had enough to do a worst books list in a while, but this year I definitely did. They can't all be winners. What are you gonna do? Okay, so kicking things off, first on my list is Still Just a Geek by Wil Wheaton. I think I talked about this in my mid-year book freakout tag video, but this is Wil Wheaton's memoir, but he went back and he heavily revised it and he made notations to almost every single entry because it was all posts that were taken from his blog and it was meant to be humorous. It was meant to be a look at what was going on in his life at the time, but obviously said some things in the past that wouldn't fly today. And while it was nice that he was apologetic and sincerely sorry about saying some of the things, using some of the words that he did, being ignorant about some of the things that he didn't know about at the time, it was a lot. It was too much apologizing to where I really was not enjoying the book because I felt like it was more apologizing than it was actual story and actual telling about his life. It was just wow, I can't believe I said that. I'm so sorry, blah 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 blah. And each apology was heartfelt, but it was just way too much. I would have appreciated it more, I think, if he would have just done a blanket apology at the beginning or at the beginning of a chapter, just say listen, I'm gonna say a couple of things in here this and this that aren't something that I would say now, but to make a note every single time that he said something, it was just ridiculous. The next book on my list is Secluded Cabin Sleep 6 by Lisa Unger. This is a thriller that I was so looking forward to. I love the premise of it. It sounds so interesting. We're following 6 characters and they are all going to this super secluded cabin in the middle of the woods, and I think it might have been on New Year's. I'm not 100% sure. That could be wrong. Maybe it wasn't New Year's, but it's a family of people that are all going and all of them have secrets, and this is a place where there's no reception, there's no Wi-Fi, there's no service, you can't really get in touch with anyone. It's super weird, and the owner of the place is doing some weird things, and all of these secrets start coming out, and then people are getting murdered, and there's a whole DNA test element that is part of why I thought it sounded really interesting, but I hated it. There were so many different perspectives in this book that it was just too much. I think it would have been much better if we would have focused on maybe 1 or 2 characters versus almost all of the characters. I just didn't really care about anyone, and while it was quick paced, it was also boring. It's so hard to explain, but I just it really didn't do it for me. It was just a thriller that did not work for me and that I would not recommend. Then I read Night Flyers by George R.R. Martin, and I read this one because I watched the sci-fi TV show adaptation a couple years ago and really enjoyed that. But I did not like the book. The book was really weird. It was really short, and that's the only reason that I finished it, but I did not like it. It was the way that it described sex in some parts was just really uncomfortable and awkward, and I listened to it and I think that made it worse. I was just oh, I don't like this. I really didn't like it. I don't think that it was a good story. I think that the changes that they made for the show were so much better. And yeah, I was expecting this cool psychological space horror book, and it was not that. Next on my list is Upgrade by Blake Crouch. I absolutely love dark matter so much, so I was really excited to read his newer book, and it did not deliver. I was really bored while I was reading this. I found that I just didn't care about the characters, and because of that, it really took away from my enjoyment of the story because I was just I don't even know why I'm still reading this. I am because I liked Blake Crouch's other books so much that maybe it'll turn around, but it just didn't. We're following a guy who gets some kind of genetic upgrade and becomes super smart, and he's being hunted by the government, and he has been taken away from his family, and it was not for me. I was really bored. I liked the scenes set in New York City just because it was fun to see New York City, but outside of that, I did not enjoy this one. Then one of the only ones that I still have a physical copy of is The Atlas Paradox by Olivia Blake. I hated this book so much, and it was so disappointing and so shocking because I loved the Atlas Six so much. I loved the pretentiousness of it. I loved the dark academia setting. Like, everything about it just worked for me so well. I really enjoyed the characters, like, despite them all being people that I would not want to know in real life. But this one just felt pointless, and I did not understand like why we were going through the story that we were going through. I felt like there was like barely any of it that was interesting at all. And some of the conversations in this one were like way more confusing for me, and there were parts of it that were really like math heavy, which I am not a math person. So this one really just did not work for me. And it's so weird because I feel like I've never gone from like loving a book so much to hating the second book in the series so much. Obviously, like, things can turn around, but I think this is like the severest difference in opinions that I've had between two books in the same series. So I'm going to read the third book, but I'm still traumatized from this one. So like, I'm not looking forward to it, but I'm really hoping that it could turn things around just because I did love that first book so much, and I just don't understand how like it could not end well despite this one really not being good. Next on my list is Dark Corners by Megan Golden. This is the second book in the Rachel Crawl series, and I love Megan Golden. I think Megan Golden is one of the best thriller writers that is currently publishing books. I so look forward to everything that she's coming out with. And this book was just a huge disappointment for me. You know what? I did like a reading vlog talking about these thrillers that I did not enjoy, and I don't think I ever got around to posting it. But one of the things that bothered me, well, two of the things that bothered me most in this book were, one, the depiction of people who do social media things. Like, it made them just look so like shallow and vapid, and made it look like there was like really no depth to anyone who was choosing to do something like that as a career. And I didn't like that. I felt like it was just like perpetuating a stereotype. We do get the perspective of the killer in the book, which was an interesting choice. And like, I liked that because it was definitely different. However, killer has like a medical issue, and that is like a defining feature of them. And like, it felt like they kind of like were a killer because of this like medical thing. Like, they didn't have a good childhood because of it. And I just like hated that as like the reason that someone becomes a serial killer. I just felt like why write that? Like, I don't know, like, we could have done anything else with this. So unfortunately, this one just like really missed the mark for me, but I will read anything else that Megan Golden comes out with because I have loved all of her other books. Next on my list is Bunny by Mona Awad. So this one I read because I was like really in a dark academia kick after reading Secret History and loving it so much. And while there were aspects of Bunny that I really enjoyed, like the writing, like I really enjoyed the writing. I thought the descriptions of things were really good and really like, it was like a really creative way of portraying the story. So like for that, I liked it. Upon finishing, I was just like, what did I read? Like even before finishing, I was like, I don't know why I'm still reading this because I don't like it, but I'm gonna keep going just because so many people talk about this book and so many people love this book. And it also just like made like this like clique of girls seem like so creepy, and like I just really didn't like this one. I think I also had really high expectations for it just because so many other people like rave about it all the time, so I thought I was gonna love it, and then I was like, I'm not seeing what everyone else is seeing. And then also really funny is like, I was trying to read reviews of it on Goodreads after I finished, and almost every review was like, this is the weirdest book I've ever read, 5 stars, or this is the weirdest book I've ever read, 1 star. And like, no one really had a lot to say about what actually happened in the book. It was all just like about whether you appreciated that it was weird or not. Next on my list is A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed. This is another one where I thought that this was going to be a favorite book of the year for me. I was so excited for this release, like you would not believe. And I read it really quickly, but I didn't enjoy it. I felt like it read so young, and I know that it is a young adult book, so obviously it is going to read on the younger side of any other like dark academia books. However, I felt like it read significantly younger, which was also like interesting because we're following a character who is in, I think she's in college. She's like an architect and she's going to help and like come up and like redesign this acclaimed author's crumbling mansion. So like it sounded so cool, but I just really didn't enjoy it. I did like the message, like I liked the ending of it, but it also wrapped up so quickly and like did not explore the elements of the novel that I was most excited about. So like the main character has been plagued by like visions of this fairy king since she was young, and I feel like we just like did not go into any depth there. I think I would have enjoyed this book a lot more if it was aged up and significantly longer so that we could actually like explore everything that I was looking forward to exploring. I also like couldn't really tell what time period it was set in. Like it felt like it was like historical, but like I couldn't figure out when. Next on my list is One by One by Ruth Ware. This is a thriller that takes place at a ski chalet, and it is following a group of people who all work at the same startup company together. I did not like any of the characters. I felt like it was super obvious from the beginning who was the murderer and like what was happening. So it just like the rest of the book like was not exciting to read because I was like, how is no one else immediately like, yep, it's that person. Like, I don't know. It just totally took away from my enjoyment because I was like, this is so glaringly obvious. I did like the like atmosphere of it. Like it was very cool to be set at this ski chalet in like the middle of like a really bad blizzard. So they're all like kind of stuck. It's like a, you know, closed room murder mystery kind of thing. So there was like some like inventiveness to it, but I just didn't like it. I felt like the writing felt like a little bit detached. So like I didn't really care about any of the characters, which I feel like that's kind of common in thrillers. Like a lot of times writers will write like kind of detached characters, but I just did not care for it. Next on my list is another thriller, and it is The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. I again was really excited for this one. It's another one that is like dark academia, so it's so funny, like I either love dark academia books or I hate them. It seems like there is like no middle ground for me, and this was one of the ones that was a huge miss. So we are following a character who is a psychologist, and her niece goes to Oxford, and there is a murder that happens, and the niece and her aunt are like convinced that this one teacher is the one that is responsible, because there's this like, he's like the classics teacher, and there's this like group of young women who like follow him around and are in this like cool exclusive club that he has, and they call themselves the Maidens, and it's one of the Maidens that dies, and then another one of the Maidens dies. So it seems like he could likely be involved, but the aunt just becomes like so obsessed with proving this man's guilt just by the police saying that like he's had solid alibis for everything. And I liked like the parallels to Greek mythology, and I thought that that was like a lot of fun, but I really hated the resolution of the thriller, and that's like really what put this on my worst books of the year list. I think that maybe if there was like a different outcome, I would have enjoyed it a lot more, but like the end totally ruined this book for me. Next is A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. This is the second T. Kingfisher book that I've read. I loved her first book that I read. It was Fantasy Nettle and Bone. I thought that was so great, and this is a horror book, and I really did not like it. It's set in like a haunted house, and I thought that it was going to be so great, but it did not work for me. A lot of people really love it though, so take my opinion here with a grain of salt. But I think part of why I didn't love it is that there were like so many scenes with like bugs and just like gross things that I just really like, I don't know, I was like, oh, I don't want to read about that. So like that really hindered my enjoyment. And then I also felt like I didn't love the main character. Like she was going back to visit her mom, and her mom like started acting really weird, and it was because like these weird things were happening in the house, but like her mom couldn't really talk about it because the house would know that she was talking about it. So it was just like strange. And like the daughter is trying to make all of these like excuses for the way that her mom's acting, and like she's calling her brother because she's like worried about what's going on, but he's like not there, so he hasn't been able to see anything. And then she starts experiencing weird things in the house, and I just didn't like it. Like I didn't find it exciting. I thought that there were parts of it that were like a bit too gruesome for me. Like, again, with the bugs, like I just really didn't like that. And then the last two worst books of the year I'm gonna include together. They're both Star Wars comics. The first one is Star Wars Allegiance by Ethan Sachs, and the second one is Star Wars Bounty Hunters Target Valance, also by Ethan Sachs. So there are a lot of really bad Star Wars comics out there, and I've been trying to read all of them just because, I mean, I'm trying to read all of them, not the bad ones. I'm trying to read the good ones too. But it seems like Ethan Sachs is like my least favorite Star Wars comics writer, and he wrote both of these. I don't remember like really much about either of them. I think that Target Valance is part of the Bounty Hunters series. It might be like the second volume, so I wouldn't even want to spoil that if I did remember it. But neither of these worked for me, and it was really sad because obviously I love Star Wars, but these were just misses. I think I read one other Star Wars comic this year, and like that was it. I think these ones kind of turned me off for a little while. And then moving on to DNFs. So the first book of the year that I DNF'd is The Last Party by Claire McIntosh. This is a thriller that takes place on New Year's Eve, and I DNF'd this one pretty early on because the writing style was just not working for me. So I could tell like I'm gonna either slog my way through this entire book and like maybe think that it's okay, or I can just stop reading it now and read something that I'm hopefully going to enjoy more. So I opted to go with the latter option. You know, knowing that the writing style was not going to change as I continued reading, I thought it was my best bet. I also DNF'd Fashion Climbing by Bill Cunningham. I love fashion. I went to fashion school for college. I went to FIT, and I usually love books about fashion. Bill Cunningham is like a really well-known fashion photographer, but I was just not vibing with the book. I thought it was kind of boring. It wasn't holding my interest. Maybe I didn't know enough about him going into it in order to like be initially captivated by what he was saying, but it just wasn't like speaking to me, so I decided to just DNF this one. The next DNF makes me really sad. It's What We Have Done by Alex Finlay, and this one I'm actually going to go back to. I'm thinking I'm going to go back to it in 2024, but it was weird because I loved Alex Finlay's two other thrillers, Every Last Fear and The Night Shift. Both of those were so good, so I was expecting to love this one too. But this one's following three characters, and I think that they all like did something together when they were younger, and now like someone's coming back and like, you know, like from their past is like revisiting and making them face something that they thought that they left behind years ago. I did not make it far into it. It just like wasn't gripping me, and I decided to like move on to something else, but I want to give this one another shot just because of how much I have enjoyed Alex Finlay's other novels. Next on my list is one that's probably gonna make people upset, and that is The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. I read about half of this book, and the only perspective that I cared about was Glokta. I did not care about the other ones at all, and it was really hard to like push myself through the book to only be liking 1/3 of the perspectives. It felt like a slog to me, and I know people have said to push through it and that it gets better, and that I know like a lot of people love Logan Nine Fingers, but he wasn't doing it for me. So I just kind of decided like, why waste my time? Like, I have so many books on my TBR that I want to read. I don't want to push myself to read something that I'm not like actually enjoying. So I also DNF'd Witch King by Martha Wells, and this is a fantasy novel of hers. I can't remember if this is one of the ones that she had like previously written that was republished now that she's more popular, or if this was a newer one. I think City of Bones was one that she was like republishing. Witch King might have been new, but this is a fantasy novel, and the beginning again just like wasn't gripping me. It felt very much like a 3-star read to me, and while 3-star reads can be good and satisfying, it was not what I was looking for at the time, so I decided to put it down and to move on with my life. Especially because I also don't like the Murderbot series. Like, I think it's fine. I read the first book and I thought it was fine. I wasn't obsessed with it the way that other people are obsessed with it, so I was like, you know what? I'm probably gonna have similar feelings about this one, judging by how I'm feeling right now, so I DNF'd it. And the final book on my list is Malice by John Gwynne. So this is another fantasy novel that many people love. They love the series so much, but I was really bored, and this is actually the second time that I've tried to read Malice. I also DNF'd it one other time in the past, and I decided, you know what, if I'm not enjoying it and it's like I'm not vibing with it, and this is the second time that I'm trying to read it, I'm going to just DNF it for good. So I did that, and that's that for Malice. I'm still interested in his other series, but I'm done with this one. But those are all of the books on my worst/disappointing books of the year, and then all of the books that I DNF'd in 2023. So let me know if you have read and had similar feelings or completely different feelings than the ones that I had toward these books. Hopefully some of you enjoyed them. Some of them are pretty popular, so I'm definitely in the minority on them, but again, like, everyone has different reading tastes. And also, like, I think timing is a huge thing when it comes to books. Like, I could read a book and not really like have strong feelings about it, and then if I read it at like a different time of my life, it could be so impactful. So like, there's a lot of factors that come into play here. But that's all that I have for this video, and I will see you guys soon in a new one. Bye!